So, Alex, welcome to Agehood. We are here in a very cozy little studio with some damn good coffee, which I'm very impressed with. And today I am really hoping to talk to you about the reality of the sandwich generation. Can you tell me a little bit about what this has looked like for you? When did you realize you were part of this?
Yeah, I think that's the first thing you realize is how quickly it happens. So probably, look, I think I knew for a long time that it would be coming for me because I'm an only child and mum is a single mum. So in terms of support, she had some great friends, but no one family that would step in for that. And over the last 10 years, she's had some health issues, but has been so fiercely independent about, no, I don't need you to care for me. Don't come up here. And so last year, about 12 months ago, she just started unravelling a bit and having a bit of what you might call a mental health breakdown or challenge, or it was just spiraling with her anxiety. And I sort of noticed it and went up there to stay with her for a while and realised that she just wasn't coping. And we lived 3 hours apart at the time. So
And you're an only child.
and I'm an only child.
So was she spiraling kind of in your direction? Were you the main source of the spiral?
She really tried so hard to protect me from it all. But there are indications. There was one night in particular where she just kept sending me these really anxious text messages that were ruminating, and nothing I would say would calm her down.
And pretty out of character?
And very out of character and quite late at night.
Yeah.
Like, what's
okay.
going on
Worrying.
here? Yeah, really worrying. And it was about legal stuff. Enduring guardianship papers, powers of attorney. And I was just thinking, what's behind this? And now in hindsight, I think it was an anxiety about losing her memory, about losing her executive functioning. She couldn't manage at home anymore. And it was probably a thinly veiled cry for help, maybe.
That you heard?
Yeah, so I went up there and she seemed to think she was okay, but was also suddenly too scared to drive her car and was a bit challenged about what to cook for dinner. And I noticed that she probably hadn't showered in a few days and really key looking after herself moments had just fallen away.
So a lot of changes in quite a short period of time.
Yes. And to be honest, as you know, life is busy as a middle-aged person with a job and 2 kids, that I probably hadn't seen her in her environment for a few months. She'd come down to visit, but I hadn't seen that there was paperwork all over the house just spread out. And, the house wasn't as tidy as it normally was. And there were once I went into the house, I realised that I had probably missed a few things.
Wow. So tell us a little bit about your mum. Tell us who she was and what your relationship was like with her before all of these changes.
In the before time.
Yeah, in the before.
Yeah. So mum was a school principal. Supremely confident, gregarious, loud voice, big booming laugh, quite social. We had some great friends in the neighbourhood that, the ladies she'd always have over for a champagne to watch the sunset on the lake. But we also had a very challenging relationship, especially in those teenage years, with a daughter and a mother being the only 2 people in a house. And also we're very different people. And perhaps in hindsight, she's always leaned towards that anxiety and that I don't want to say I'm going to lean towards that anxiety. I'm going to leave it
contained in that.
Yeah.
Okay.
I don't want to accidentally be unkind. But yeah, we did butt heads a lot. But
Which is also very normal, isn't it?
Oh, of course. But, we love each other dearly. We're so connected to each other as a single mum and a daughter are. Yeah. And she did everything for me. She sacrificed so much, worked really hard to, send me to a private school, even though she was a single mum. And I did dancing and all the things. Yeah. She really pushed herself so I could have the best. So, of course, now in the reverse situation, I want to be able to give her the best. And it's not always easy to know what that is for someone who's older.
No.
No.
And I heard you talk about this and really describe the kind of the gift or the privilege of being able to, it comes with a lot of complexity and stuff we've got to figure out. But It is a real gift, isn't it, to be able to return that
Mm,
love,
mm.
in a different chapter of your mum's life. So then help us understand a little bit about where your life was at when this moment or period of unraveling started.
So I'm what they might call I like to be busy. I have three side hustles and a full-time job and two kids that are very high energy, still at primary school, do a lot of activities. And I have a husband who commutes to Sydney. So we live about an hour and a half from the city. So there's also a lot of time where I'm sort of single parenting.
Mm.
Um, so I would have told you that I was at capacity before mum got sick. Um,
Amazing how we can stretch ourselves to well beyond
but at what
capacity.
cost, Melissa? At
Yes, well,
what
that's what we're
cost?
here to talk about.
So look, when I went to see mum, I did realize that she needed to be put into some sort of care. And I thought at the time that was a short stay at like a private psychiatric hospital, somewhere nice and comfortable where she can get some medication, get a
Yeah.
bit of help and support. We can arrange some help at home and then she can come back into her environment.
And also that she has a support structure outside of you and your relationship, because that's so important in those situations as
Yes,
well.
and I just couldn't be driving 3 hours every
Yeah.
week to
Yeah.
support her. My life just didn't have the room in it. But in hospital, unfortunately, she had a fall and she broke her arm and then had a delirium. And if anybody else has been in this situation, it unravels so fast. And for someone at the age of 81, it just knocked her for six. And she spent 6 months in hospital.
Did she? And hospitalisation can actually really impact someone's mobility and
Oh, and it
frailty.
did.
Yeah,
So
so common.
So I had to fight hard to have her in a hospital near us and had to have her moved, which meant a lot of waiting for beds and being in emergency rooms when it wasn't the place for her.
Mhm.
And that had a real impact on her mental health, but her state of awareness, because she'd been moved and had a delirium, she didn't know where she was for a long time. And so for me, that was so upsetting just to feel partially to blame. I put her in hospital. She needed to go, but I'm the one that did that. And it's hard to separate yourself from that guilt. And that if perhaps I'd done something differently and left her at home with different supports, maybe all of this wouldn't happen. But then there's another track you could go down, which is she
Yeah.
could have had a fall at home and it could have been a lot worse. And there are all these what ifs that
Yeah.
you're constantly running through your head. But yes, I was very busy. So having her in a hospital close, and when I say close, it's still a 50-minute drive from our house to the hospital. So at the time, I would drop my kids to school.
That's
and
just close because you live in a regional area, by the
Yes.
way. Like
Yeah.
that's the version
Yeah.
of close that.
It's closer than 3 hours
Yes,
away where she
exactly.
lived
Yeah.
at the time.
Yeah.
So I would drop the kids at school and then I would log on to work for a bit, send some furious emails and then drive down the freeway, spend a few hours with her and then come back for school pickup time and have my laptop at her bedside doing work
Gosh.
emails at the time. And it got to a point where I had to say to my work, look, I need to step away for a while. And
It must
I'm
have been tough.
very tough and very
Yeah.
emotional. And it was also at a time in my work where I was launching a big project that was mine and I had ownership over it and was really proud of it. And I had to just hand that to someone and say, you go for it. But I don't regret that part of it at all. In fact, I'm really grateful that I have a job that can allow me to do that. But it was also so important for me to be at the hospital because when you don't know where you are or what's happening to you and you're panicked and anxious, it's really important to have an advocate
Yeah, of course.
to be able to give medical history and fill in the gaps for all the doctors.
Emotional support just to be your mum's person. But it's a lot, when you're the only sibling, that's a huge amount to be carrying. What happened from there? When your mum eventually left hospital?
Yes, it took quite a while. But she came home just before Christmas, which is an interesting time as well because services shut down for Christmas and New Year.
And emotions just run high.
And it's
generally.
a stressful time. Yes, we were hosting Christmas and suddenly we had mum living with us. So during mum's time in hospital, I realised that she couldn't go home. And also that if she did go home for a time, I wouldn't be able to get her out again to sell the house and to move her somewhere. So while she was in hospital, with her consent, me telling her what was going on, I packed up our family home of 35 years and sold it on her behalf.
No
And
small task, Alex. You
no,
just
it
said that
was
in a single sentence, like it was a weekend's work. But that's a big job too, emotionally and
it's very
practically.
emotional going through all the family photos
Yeah.
and also having to make those executive decisions. Do I keep this or do I throw this out? And mums of that generation, they kept everything. You know,
Everything.
I'm a thrower. I'm a declutterer from way back, but mum really loves to have her things around her and I think it gives her comfort. So I'm still fielding questions like, did you throw out that dinner set? And what about my hot rollers? And so
What about your hot roll?
yeah, I do have a rehearse line of I had to make some big decisions and I'm sorry if they weren't the right ones, but you know, we can try to remedy that. But the local charity shop loved me at the time. So we'd sold mum's house and the plan was for her to move in with us. We have a granny flat at the back of our
Okay.
property, which again, I totally acknowledge my privilege in living in a
Yeah.
country town where we
Yeah.
have a bit more space and can do that. Um, but coming out of hospital required so much rehabilitation. The hospitalisation made her so much more unwell than she was when before
Physically
she
or
went in.
mentally or a bit of both?
A bit of both, but
Yeah.
mostly physically.
Yeah.
Her mobility was such that I had to basically carry her from bed to bathroom and back. Couldn't stand to
Really?
shower. I was toileting her for the first 2 weeks. Luckily, my husband was in the States for work. And so she slept in my bed with me.
Oh.
And so I was just a 24-hour nurse, basically. And
And I guess you're thinking, like, where does this go from here with that level of care
I
required on a
had
daily?
really psyched myself up for it. I knew how
Uh-huh.
unwell she was and I wasn't working. And this was an intensive period for me to rehabilitate her. I just took it on like a project. Like, we're going to get you back.
Girl.
If not to where you were, but to somewhere near there, you know, to some level of independence. And I did achieve the level of that with so much help from programs when you come out of hospital. The transitional aged care program was excellent. We had physios and OTs and just beautiful allied health people coming to see mum, mental health people from the community. So we'd have someone every day. And while that's so much support, it's also another big job for the carer because it's your phone they call, it's your calendar that it all goes into.
They're coming into your house. You've got to manage all of that side of it.
Yeah. And, you know, I've got 2 rowdy dogs and just managing 2 kids on school holidays, 2 dogs, mum, the people coming in and out. It's a lot. But by the end of, I guess, the 3-month period, they have a 12-week transitional aged care period. She was so much better physically, but not mentally. She was still really depressed. And I think that was a big turning point for me to be like, I've done all I can in terms of helping her physically, but there's nothing I can do about her mental state.
What did the depression look like for your mum in that period?
She just couldn't enjoy anything. I mean, every meal we would prepare her, she wouldn't like. And when you're the carer and you are, you know, just worn thin, your resilience has disappeared. Something as small as someone saying it's too salty or it's too spicy or it's not how I would have cooked it, or
Just flips you over the edge.
it does
right?
just tip you over the edge.
Yeah. And I think meal times, you know, in a house that's kind of stretched pretty thin, there's maybe this idea that meal times are a kind of, there's some relief in all coming together.
Yeah.
Maybe we'll actually have a beautiful
Yeah.
conversation and we'll enjoy. So yeah, there's probably a hope attached to every one of those
And
meals
with 2
that got
tired kids
poo-pooed
as well, you know, they don't love eating the
Yeah.
food I prepare them sometimes as well. So it does feel a bit like no one likes the food I'm preparing. I have to convince everybody in this household to shower and because mum wouldn't really get out of bed unless I really urged her. I was trying to keep her active, so I would drive her to the local park to walk around slowly most days. And just the time and the effort to get her out of bed was like over an hour. And then
Alec.
to shower, she just developed this phobia of the shower. I don't know if she was afraid of slipping or she just didn't like being cold or the feeling of the water or the vulnerability of being naked. I don't know. But she just wouldn't shower. And so it just got to the point where I was so frazzled and upset. I was just crying every day and just realised I couldn't manage her care needs like that. I can't force you to shower.
No.
And I would have to get very stern, and then I would feel awful about it.
And what that does to your relationship and
Yeah.
sense of self. And yeah.
And so we weren't having any positive interactions. It was just me barking orders at her that were things that were good for her, but she couldn't see that. So I sort of realized that her with us was probably not a long-term thing, as much as I still, wish that could have happened. So we did some tours of local residential aged care facilities just to get her used to the idea. Like, this is what's on offer. We can just look at them all. We're just looking. And we went through one which was quite lovely and quite small comparatively. And the lady called the next day and said, just out of interest, and she must have seen something in me that needed it. She said, we've got some respite. We've got a respite bed available. Have you ever considered that?
What a gem of a woman. Spotting that.
Yeah, she might have just seen the tear welling at the corner of my eye or the wobble in my voice, which is also happening now. But she offered some respite, but I had to decide within a day. So I had to sort of convince Mum to go into respite the next day, which was a challenge, and she was quite upset and quite uncertain, and understandable, It must have just felt like, I'm just being put away. But for me, it was, now I look back and think it was a lifeline because I was sort of falling apart. Yeah. Anyway, I haven't drawn breath in that sentence.
What a story.
Yeah, and that was a few months ago now, that respite.
And your mum's in residential care now following respite?
Yes. So the respite, there's a limited number of days per year, 63 or something like that. And I'm not the expert on this, but I'm learning as I go along. But beautifully, they kept calling towards the end of each period and would say, would you like another week? We have another week. And I would say, yes, just a little bit more time.
Did your mum slowly start?
And she did. She warmed up. Yeah. And it was a combination of, so the older person's mental health unit has a community team that visits her. And so they were coming to the house, but then went in to see her at the aged care place. So she has continuity of people and faces. And I think they tweaked her medication around almost exactly the same time that she went in. So it was probably a combination of new medication and the right combination of medications and constant company. Yeah. Like, even at home with us, we're a busy young family. We're at work all day. The kids are at school. And even when they're home, they don't have the time to gently engage with an older person. They're doing their own thing, their homework, they're on screens, they're running around.
There's like an inevitable loneliness, isn't there? I think we underplay that.
Yeah, and so disconnected.
Yeah, and like, who am I now that everything is changing? And it's changing for inevitable reasons, but it's still very real change for that person. Okay, so I'm really pleased to hear that she's slowly settled into that new
and so she started talking about people that she'd met. And I think just having nurses around all day to say, good morning, how are you? How are you feeling today? Even if she could complain to them endlessly about the quality of the food there, which, she does.
But she wasn't complaining to you, and that's a good
But it's someone to talk to every day.
Yeah, it's feeling seen and heard, isn't it?
So in the first month, she wouldn't have left her room for a meal or an activity. But now she has every meal in the dining room, and she goes to most of the activities they put on, like bingo or quiz nights or a bus trip or... Yeah.
I bet there's lots of listeners that will have seen that transition. It's really, really common. Like, it's such an emotional ocean when you're making that transition into permanent residential care. It takes everybody a lot of time to settle into that new circumstance because people's roles change. You can go back to being the daughter, in that situation.
And I have. And we have briefer times together, but better times together. So we signed the paperwork together last week, and it was still very emotional. And that was because of weights on ACAT for the final assessment and things like that. And I thought I was okay with it, but I was still struck down by an immense sense of guilt, But that's just something I can rationalise away because I know that she's probably in the best place for her.
It's so often the right decision at the right time. It's just a really hard one to reach.
Yes.
Have you got some tissues?
It's okay.
I've been reading a lot lately around this concept of carenting.
Mm,
So you're kind of parenting your parent with all of the mix of love and duty and a little bit of obligation thrown
mm,
into that recipe. And I'm really interested in the dynamics of parenting. Your parent is not the person they once were.
mm,
We spend all of our lives, well, not all of us, some of us, looking up to our parents, seeking their approval, looking for their guidance. Suddenly,
mm.
all those roles reverse. And it sounds like that may have played out in your experience too.
Definitely. But I wouldn't say those roles disappear. So
Yeah.
in having to make the decisions for mum and tell her what to do and know what's best for her, I was still looking for her approval and wanting her to be proud of me and all those
Oh,
things. So
yeah.
I think it's really hard to ever let go of those things.
Yeah.
And the same for her. Hard to let go for her of trying to parent me. So I think she also felt an immense sense of guilt for being an imposition on me or taking my time or away from the kids or from my work, whatever. Um, but it is an immense role reversal. And unlike parenting your children, there's often a lot of reluctance in my experience for someone to want to be parented by their child. It's so you're pushing shit uphill for want
Yeah.
of a better phrase.
And for everything
All
that
the
you're
time.
taking on, often they're having to give so much up,
Mm.
so it's a really complex seesaw. Um, there's also a lot of anticipatory grief in that
Oh, yeah.
experience. It's not really a term that, again, is talked about enough, but in the work that we do, grief can start with a diagnosis or just a change in someone's mobility or personality or whatever those set of events are, but it starts quite early, right?
Mm.
Did you feel that?
Oh, deeply, and I think I'm still really feeling it. I think I said to my husband the other day in a bit of an emotional awake moment, I just said something like, "My mum will never go on a bushwalk again or drive to a beach," and I can do those things with her. She can't bushwalk, obviously, but there are things that she won't do. Probably have an overseas holiday, or yeah, and it makes me sad. And he said, "Yes, but is she upset about it?" And we haven't spoken about that, but I don't know. So they're the kinds of things that when I'm feeling low, I might think about. Um, but also, I think I grieved when mum was disconnected and mentally unwell. The relationship with her and the kids. She used to be the most doting grandmother, and since being unwell has been quite disconnected from the kids and unable to kind of just get to them on their level or really um, be interested and ask questions and be engaged in the same way that she used to. And that makes me quite sad.
I imagine there's a lot of grieving in that for the kind of grandmothering role that
Mm.
you wanted your kids to have for longer. Do they sense that? Do you think that have they noticed that change?
Yes, but I don't think the kids. Yeah, it doesn't really bother them in a way that it does me
Yeah.
watching from the outside.
Yeah. Yeah.
Um, but yeah, you know, sorry. Thinking of all these things does bring all the emotion back. But
It's okay. I mean, it's
oh, I
it's
know.
real. It's in some ways such an ordinary thing for a person to reach the end of a well-lived life. It's such an
Mm,
ordinary thing. It's just part of our human condition. But when you're going through it, it is so extraordinary.
mm.
And there's a pretty big delta between those two things. I'm wondering, throughout your life and your relationship with your mum, did you ever talk about this stage of life with her?
No, not really. Maybe when Mum's done the same thing. Mum had to be the person who made the decision to put her parents into residential aged care, and not a particularly long time before she went in.
Oh, really?
So I think I can't remember the years, but probably maybe a decade or so earlier, she'd put her parents into care, and it really knocked her around then. And we had some conversations then where she'd said, I'm going to make decisions early. I'm going to move out of my house. I'm going to put myself in care. But I think those best laid plans just most of the time for a lot of people probably unravel out of your control because things happen, life happens.
Life happens, and they are, they're often tender conversations. They can be slightly confronting conversations to have. So it's pretty easy for us as people to say, oh, I'll leave that till after Christmas, or I'll leave
Yeah.
that till, next year, or when my brother's back in town, or whatever that rationale is. It's pretty easy to put those things off. And what I see a lot is that it ends up in this kind of perpetual cycle of too little, too late.
Yes.
We kind of all know in the back of our minds that we do need to think about and talk about and plan for these life chapters, like you do if you're having a child. But there's no Joyce baby at the end of this life stage, and it is just a lot easier to try and put it to the side.
Absolutely. The only way this thing ends is one way, and that's the reality of it. But it would have been nice to have more conversations with her about it. I'm a pretty open book. I think I tried more than she was willing to have that. Willing to have that conversation, but I'll probably be the same when it's my own mortality and aging we're talking about. But it has made me think, I've had these conversations with my husband about as soon as the kids leave home, we move out of this family home, having the home that suits you for the time, making decisions early, being ahead rather than being behind.
You do. You learn so much from living through this. I think a lot and I talk a lot about what we're seeing with mental health. So if you and I were sitting here 15 years ago talking about mental health, we would not have had a language for it as a community. It would have been still quite stigmatized and taboo. And we certainly wouldn't have a real service ecosystem. Where would we get support? Like, look where we've come. And I'm not saying it's perfect, but it's a lot further forward than where we were 10 or 15 years ago. And that's exactly what I think we need to start to do as a community around this life stage. Because when you look at the reality of our population, 12,000 people reach 85 each year today. But in 5 years, that's going to be 60,000 people. And that's going to continue for quite a few years. It's like a five-fold increase. So it's going to affect so many families and communities.
The impact will be huge.
The impact will be huge. We're feeling it now. And we're at the very, very tip of that aging wave. So really, as a community, I think we've got to dig deep and have the courage to have those conversations and start to push the progress that we've seen with other areas. I mean, miscarriage, menopause, they're in the zeitgeist they weren't just a couple of years ago. So I hope we can do better with this topic and life stage.
I told my story on a podcast I make. That's how, I came to be here, called Ladies We Need to Talk.
Which is brilliant, by the way. And if you don't listen, you should.
From that, I've had so many people approach me. And I've been working on this podcast for 6 or 7 years. Never have I had the amount of people come to me and say, I've shared that with so many women in my life. And it's generally women.
It is.
I mean, I don't want to stereotype, but largely
the data tells us that.
It falls to women.
2/3 of people in this caregiver role, they are women. Usually the eldest daughter, and they're caring for a parent or a partner.
Or both parents in some case. I had
in-laws.
A woman email me to say thank you, that she's a single mum with 3 kids that are neurodiverse, a mum with early onset dementia, and as of a month ago, a dad with early onset dementia. Wow. And she's caring for all of them on her own. And, might not be as set up financially, to make decisions. So, things like mum had planned really well financially. So she could afford to go to an aged care facility when she needed to. But not everyone's in that position, and it's really tricky.
It really is. But also you had the tenacity to not only be her advocate, but to navigate the system that she needed for her care. And I think that's really hard for people as well. They can, it's a really complicated system to figure out.
There were times when I felt so bleak and hopeless with her in the wrong hospital ward, big southwestern Sydney hospital, and no one seemed to know when the next step would come or when she might be moved. And I just remember, I just want to tell this story because it just gave me so much hope at the time. This lovely nurse called Bernadette, a more senior nurse, she just clocked me and could see that I was struggling. And she just came up to me and put her hand on my arm and said, "How can I help you?"
Oh,
And I unraveled the whole story of Mum. And she said, "Give me 2 hours and I'll solve this problem for you." And she was an angel. She was incredible. She found the right people, the right doctors to come and see Mum. And within a couple of days, Mum had been moved from this ward that wasn't appropriate for her into the right place. And it was all because of one woman just taking it upon herself to, change things. It was just incredible.
shout out to that wonderful woman
Yeah,
at that
thank you, Bernadette.
hospital. And also the woman who noticed your need for respite. Like, they sound like two quite pivotal moments.
I think there's
where
quite a
you were
few people in
seen.
those moments, in that bigger time, that really had a big impact. And you don't see them again, or you don't, get the opportunity to sometimes thank them, but they make such a difference.
And you never forget it, right?
No.
That moment. Yeah. Got a story like that
Mm.
too. Tell me a little bit more about how you looked after yourself during all of this. Now, I appreciate that in many ways your mum's now in residential care and you can take a bit of a breath and kind of assess things in a new way. And maybe you don't have so many daily demands on you, which I'm really pleased to hear about. How did you manage? How did you think about self-care? Did you in that period? Tell us a little bit about
I
that.
think self-care was a bit of an amorphous idea in that period. Randomly, as I was putting Mum into hospital, my husband had a work trip overseas that he could take me on and we had planned to go on. And so weirdly, in this most emotional time, I suddenly got to go to Europe for a week on a business trip. And I had to give myself some very stern talking tos, but had said, "You will enjoy this week. She's been cared for, try." And I managed to sort of squeeze it out of my head in often enough to actually relax and have a good time. So I think that's important, trying to let go of the guilt, have a little break and go, even when, it was all a hot mess back at home. And I knew I was going to hit the ground and it was just going to be awful, but that the world wouldn't fall apart for the 5 days that I was away.
And you got to take those
And
breaks
that
when
I
they
had to
come your
take
sweet
it.
way
Yeah,
in
yeah.
those circumstances, right? Because too often they just don't.
But I don't actually know. There's not a whole lot of time for self-care in that period. My friends were amazing. Like, women friends were just incredible. My husband was, great. I still think that sometimes it can be challenging for them to really understand how hard it is. But leaning on your friends in those moments is really important, and also leaning on the friends who'd had parents that had been unwell or been in that situation, because the level of empathy is really
That's what
high.
I was just going to go to. I think the people that have walked this path, that have kind of been in the shoes you're in and understand all of the mess of emotions and all those very varied forms of grief that we talked about, you get it, right? You can just get that they understand through a particular kind of nod and smile. And I think lived experience is such a big part of helping us figure this out.
Absolutely.
And I just so regularly hear people that have gone through this experience of caring for someone, they want to give that back. They want to kind of help others navigate that better and differently, because it can be so lonely and so overwhelming.
It is overwhelming. I think one other thing I noticed is when you are really in it, when it's, at the peak of it, the worst part, I guess, being in hospital all day for me was hard with Mum and the treatments. You don't have time to fall apart, but maybe when I think Mum had gone into respite, life slowed down a little. I found myself having a period of just collapsing a little. I think I got sick. I was more emotional.
Yeah, right. All the adrenaline
The adrenaline
levels
washed
dropped,
away.
and so everything else stepped in.
Absolutely. Yeah. And when you have time to feel it, then sometimes you might fall apart afterwards. So, that's probably what I would say to someone who's in it right now, that it might feel worse for a while before it gets better. Um, but it does.
It does.
Mm.
How did you manage going back into work? Like, what I'm imagining from what you've told that there was kind of an upside to going back to work, but maybe a difficult part of it as well.
Absolutely.
Tell me a bit about
Yeah. So
that.
going back to work was great from a sense of you sort of switch your brain off 8 hours a day from the home stuff as much as you can. I was working and having mum's physios and OTs and whatnot come over. Um, but you do get to put your brain onto something else, which is really nice, distraction, but it is another load to take on, another worry. And, you know, in my job, I manage people. So
Yeah.
you're looking after your parents, your children, your home life, and your team. You know, it just becomes
Classic
another
sandwich.
caring role. But I also have an amazing team at work who are really supportive, um, really close. So they knew everything that was going on for me. And if I needed to drop something, they would just absorb it. Like I owe them a lot. So I went back part-time to start 3 days
Yeah,
a week
great.
and then built back up to full-time. Mm.
Imagine there's just going to be so many workplaces where we're going to see our colleagues and our friends all
Absolutely.
leaning into the same experience.
And I did use all of my sick leave, all of my personal leave, all of my annual leave, and then was working without pay. And it was, you know, it was a tricky time
Yeah.
because we have a mortgage and the
Yeah,
interest rates are high and cost of living is
absolutely.
high.
Yeah.
So we really had to kind of, it was a challenging period. But also I'm lucky that I have a partner that could support us through that time. Not everybody has that. Um, and not everybody has a workplace that will allow you to take 3 to 4 months off with no pay and, you know, an end date that's a bit amorphous. I think I'll be back by then, but I don't know what's going to happen. So I'm really grateful. And I think there's probably a lot of workplaces that need to create some sort of policy around caring
Absolutely.
and caring leave because now if my kids are sick, I can't take a day off work.
Well, you think about the proportion of sandwich generation women
Mm,
that are represented in the workforce and what their participation means to our economy,
mm,
and that is going to have a real impact.
mm.
You're right. I think there's a huge amount of policy development. I mean, the fact that we only have a kind of 2-day bereavement
Yeah.
policy in most, not in all, but in most organisations, there's a lot to be done in that space. And
Mm,
some of the progressive companies are already picking that up, but I think that's going to become the reality faster than a
mm,
lot of organisations realise. Hey, so, you know, you work in the media.
mm.
How do you think about this experience that you've had and that you're very much still in with your mum culturally? When you think about the size of the problem, the demographic shift, the message that we want to get out there to women, what's on your mind?
That's a really big
It's a
question.
big question. We can unpack it in parts.
Yeah. Look, culturally is something as well. You know, people from other cultural backgrounds also have very different expectations put upon them about care for their parents and that it would not be acceptable to put your aging parents into a residential aged care facility like I have. You know, that would be frowned upon and it's only to be living in the family home of
That's
the
right.
children. So I understand that, you know, there are more pressures depending on your cultural background or your family, you know, in general. Um, I wish this wasn't such a problem for women only. I wish the problem was a bit more equally shared because already you take so much time out of your work and your career when you're creating a family if you have kids. And then so quickly, when you gain momentum again, to be taking time off at the other end.
And we just spent like years trying to get the perfect combination of childcare for our kids, didn't we?
Mm,
Like, what a negotiation that is.
absolutely.
Access and quality and cost. And then you're right, this starts to creep in when people are in kind of hitting the stride of their
You do,
careers.
yes, a bit of momentum in your career because the
Yeah.
kids are probably a little older. I'm going to caveat that I'm probably youngish for the sandwich generation. My kids are still in primary school, and I think a lot of people feel it when the kids are in high school or have just left home. But my mum had me a bit older and had some health challenges. So I've hit it while the kids still really need a lot from me. Um, but in terms of work, yeah, I do. There are opportunities that I probably have missed out on in the last 12 months stepping up into a different role or, taking on a new project because I just couldn't. I couldn't take on a new thing, or I wasn't around enough for people to think I could take that on either. So there are sacrifices or, things that didn't happen in my career because of it. But I don't think I'd ever look back and go, gee, I wish I didn't care for my mum and I got that new job.
Of course not. Of course not. But when you think like systemically at the number of women this is going to impact and what that will mean in terms of downward pressure on productivity, women's financial stability, superannuation, all of those things that we know are already in the mix, it's really going to amplify it.
Absolutely. And I don't know what the solution is.
No.
I'm sorry. I'm not that smart person. I wish some really smart person would put their mind to it and solve the problem. But we do talk about the cost to women of childbearing.
Yeah.
We don't really talk about the cost to women of caring for family members. And it's not something I really anticipated that would affect my work or my home life so much,
And you said it happened sooner than you ever thought it would.
Quickly.
Yeah.
So quickly.
Yeah.
And I'm lucky. My mum was really organised with paperwork, wills, power of attorney, guardianship. She ticked all the boxes in that respect. She's booked and paid for her own funeral.
Yeah, right.
Like,
so she's a pretty small minority
she's
of
epically organised.
Yeah, epically organised. I love that term.
But you also can't control when your mind unravels or when your body falls apart.
Well, that's it. And so I hear so often people will say to me, I'm really organised. I've got all this stuff in place. And they may have a will and a power of attorney. And then I start to ask some probing questions around their care priorities. And most people have not even gone there. We have a really low take-up of advanced care plans.
Yes, and to be honest, that's on my to-do list. We haven't done it yet, but it's definitely on the list.
And they don't always serve the purpose that they're meant to serve. They're quite hard for people to engage with. They can feel quite legal and technical. So I think we need a better solution in that space. It just feels more human and more kind of easy to adopt and to share with people. But that is certainly part of this whole bucket of what we call sadmin, the really tough, heartache heavy, time and cost heavy bunch of stuff that you need to think about and talk about and plan for.
It's a fair bit of extra admin. I might have said to my husband in a heated moment about the mental load, for example. I've taken on an entire adult human's bank account, car insurance, home insurance, Centrelink profile.
And your mum's an epically organised person, so,
Yes, imagine how challenging that is if you don't know where the paperwork is or if you don't have access being a power of attorney. Mum wasn't in a state to sign anything over to me while she was unwell. Lucky she'd already done it and I could just go to the bank and say, can I please have access? Here is the paperwork. What I don't think Mum was good at was the emotional stuff. This is what I would like in my later years. This is what would make me happy. I don't think she could go there herself. I still try to have those conversations with her, but they do get a bit swept away, It's the practical stuff as long as the boxes are ticked.
More hoovering, less hand-holding.
Yeah.
Well, yeah, and I think that's where we need help too as a society because those aren't conversations that can usually happen in a single moment. They are conversations you need to return to over and over. And you kind of build a little bit more confidence every time you have them. I think you move a little bit more further forward. So as I guess everything you've been through, Alex, what would be your one message out there to the women of the sandwich generation who are either living this reality with you right now or will be in the years ahead?
Watch me do about 5 messages, not one message.
Fire away.
Look, I think if it hasn't happened yet and you might be thinking, oh, maybe my parents are getting a bit older, encouraging them to downsize, encouraging them to sign paperwork, like decide which sibling might be the power of attorney or the enduring guardian and spread that out a bit within the members of the family. If you have siblings, give the boy siblings some...
Give everyone a job.
A job, yes. And also if you have siblings, chatting to them without your parents there. What do we think should happen when our parents get old and how will we share this load in a fair way that is supportive to each other? If you're in the middle of it, try to look after yourself, try to take those brief moments, go into a dark movie cinema and watch a film alone and cry for an hour and a half. Reach out to your friends, even if you think they don't get it or they don't understand, just call someone for a cry. And I guess just try to enjoy some of the nicer moments with your parent, rather than the doing and the caring and the, just a touch or a hug or a lunch or just sitting in the sun together. Those tiny moments can be really lovely.
Because time becomes the most precious thing.
Yes. Yeah, it does.
It's a beautiful place to land our chat. Thank you for bringing in all that honesty and a few of those tears. I think everyone listening will be sending you a big hug.
Thank you. And I just want to reiterate, I'm fine. It's just when you talk about your mum, the tears come.
Yeah, it happens.
Thanks for having me. It was
Alex.
a real pleasure.
Thank you.
Thanks.